Have you ever asked yourself why the quietest moments feel the heaviest? When everything goes silent, and it's just you, no noise, no people, no distractions. What do you hear? That silence can be terrifying. It forces you to confront thoughts you've buried, wounds you've ignored, and truths you've tried to outrun. But inside that silence lies a kind of power you've never touched before. It's not in the crowd. It's not in the approval of others. It's in you. In the raw, unfiltered version of yourself that can only be discovered when you walk alone. Most people are afraid to be alone. They confuse it with being forgotten, unloved, or unworthy. But solitude isn't abandonment. It's freedom. It's the moment you stop outsourcing your value and start claiming it for yourself. When the world goes quiet, your inner world begins to speak. And for the first time, you realize that voice inside you, the one you've ignored for so long, is wiser, stronger, and more powerful than you ever imagined. That's the truth most people never discover, because they never let themselves walk far enough away from the noise to hear it. When you walk alone, you stop performing, you stop pleasing, you stop molding yourself to fit the expectations of people who don't even know who you really are. You strip it all back, no mask, no roles, just you. That kind of solitude is not weakness, it's transformation. It's where you stop being a follower of opinions and start being the leader of your own life. You begin to understand your patterns, your wounds, your desires, not through someone else's lens, but through your own clear, unfiltered sight. That is where real power is born. Not in applause, not in followers, in the quiet confidence of knowing who you are when no one is watching. The moment you stop fearing solitude is the moment you begin to rise, because when you walk alone, you stop leaning on things that were never meant to hold you. You build strength from the inside out. You stop needing validation to feel worthy. You stop needing company to feel whole. You become your own foundation, and foundations built in solitude, they don't crumble when others leave. They don't break when life gets hard. They endure. They rise. They carry everything. This is why you're here. To remember that walking alone isn't your downfall, it's your awakening. This journey you're on right now, where it feels like no one understands, where every step feels uncertain, where silence is your only companion, this is where your real life begins. You're not lost. You're being refined. You're being reintroduced to your strength, your voice, your power. And if you stay with this, if you dare to keep walking even when it hurts, you will discover a version of yourself so unstoppable, so unbreakable, that no one will ever again be able to define you, limit you, or break you. So stay with this. Watch till the end. Because what's waiting for you isn't just comfort, it's transformation. There is a rare kind of strength that comes from facing everything alone and still choosing to rise. When the people you thought would stay walk away, when the ones you trusted turn silent, and when you're left standing in the ruins of what used to be your comfort, something inside you changes. At first it feels like breaking, but it's not. It's your old self shedding, your illusions falling apart, and your soul stepping forward, stripped of everything false. Pain becomes the chisel that shapes you. Loneliness becomes the mirror that shows you who you are. And though the process is brutal, it is also sacred, because you can't become unstoppable by staying comfortable. Every time you walk forward without a hand to hold, you rewrite your story. You stop waiting to be saved. You stop waiting for someone else to tell you you're enough. You realize you've had everything you needed inside of you all along. The voice of doubt that once held you back starts to quiet, and the voice of truth, the one you buried beneath years of seeking approval, begins to rise. That voice says, you are more than what happened to you. You are more than the people who couldn't see your worth. You are more than the past you've survived. You are still here, and that matters. The world may not always clap for you. It may not notice your silent battles or your quiet victories, but you weren't born for applause. You were born for purpose. And walking alone teaches you to find your way without a map, to trust your steps without needing someone else's permission. You begin to feel it, this fire deep inside you that refuses to die no matter how cold the world gets. That fire is your resilience. It's the reason you get up again. It's the reason you don't quit. It's the reason you've come this far, even when everything told you to stop. When you embrace the path of solitude, you no longer chase people who don't see you. You no longer beg for a seat at tables that were never built for you. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable, and you stop pretending to be less so someone else can feel more. You take up space. You claim your life. And that quiet walk alone becomes the foundation for a louder, bolder, more powerful version of yourself. The strength you are building now will not fade, because it's not borrowed, it's earned. You are walking through fire, and you are not being destroyed. You are being forged. And when this chapter ends, when you look back at the miles you walked alone, you will not see isolation. You will see transformation. You will realize that the loneliness was not punishment, it was preparation. And what's being prepared in you now is unshakable. No storm, no loss, No rejection will ever again make you question your worth. Because once you faced the darkness and kept walking, you become the light. You don't need to be surrounded to feel whole. You don't need applause to feel worthy. What you need is to see yourself clearly, to stand in front of your own reflection and finally say, I am enough. Not because someone told you, not because someone stayed, but because you chose to believe it. That belief changes everything. It silences the inner critic that once ruled your mind. It breaks the chains of needing others to validate your existence, and it gives birth to the version of you that doesn't chase love, but becomes it, that doesn't seek acceptance, but stands rooted in self-respect. This isn't just about being strong, it's about becoming untouchable in the deepest sense. When you walk alone and still choose to keep going, you become someone who cannot be broken by absence, by rejection, by silence. You stop being controlled by what you cannot control. You stop attaching your peace to unpredictable people and shifting circumstances. You stop reacting and start responding. You reclaim your power one moment at a time. And in that quiet power, there is peace. A peace that doesn't waver when someone leaves. A peace that doesn't collapse when life doesn't go your way. Solitude sharpens your mind. It clears your vision. You begin to notice things, patterns, behaviors. Thoughts that once ruled you begin to lose their grip. You become more aware of what drains you, what feeds you, what deserves your energy, and what no longer fits the person you're becoming. That awareness is everything. It's your armor, it's your guide, and it allows you to walk into any room, not needing to be chosen, but already knowing you belong simply because you chose yourself first. You may not see the results yet. You may still feel like you're wandering in the dark. But transformation is rarely loud. It happens quietly, in the discipline of staying consistent, in the courage to sit with your own discomfort instead of running from it, in the decision to speak to yourself with love, even when you feel unlovable. That's where strength is born. Not in pretending you're okay, but in facing what hurts and refusing to let it define you. There is a reason the road you're walking feels lonely. It's not because you're not enough. It's because you're no longer willing to settle for less than you deserve. And as painful as that is, it is also powerful. Because people who walk alone, who learn to love their own company, become dangerous in the best way. They can no longer be manipulated by fear, guilt, or scarcity. They know they can rebuild from nothing. They know their peace cannot be taken. It can only be surrendered. And they've stopped surrendering. You are becoming that person. The one who rises without applause. The one who moves without permission. The one who grows without anyone watching. Keep walking. You're not just surviving, you're evolving. And nothing is more unstoppable than that. There's a moment in solitude when the silence stops being loud and starts becoming sacred. It no longer feels like absence. It begins to feel like presence. Your presence. Not the version of you shaped by who you had to be for others, but the real you. The one beneath the masks, beneath the roles, beneath the noise. That version of you doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't beg for permission. It doesn't crave validation. It simply exists. Strong, clear, and unshaken. And once you find that part of yourself, you'll never want to lose it again. Because it's the foundation of everything you've been searching for outside of yourself. When you walk alone, you're not empty. You're being refined. Every step forward in silence is a step deeper into truth. You start to realize that peace isn't something you wait to receive. It's something you decide to create. You understand that happiness doesn't arrive when someone else chooses you. It grows when you choose to honor yourself. And once that shift happens, your standards rise, your boundaries get stronger, your energy changes. You begin to protect your time, your mind, your spirit like your life depends on it, because it does. You stop engaging in things that drain you. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand. You stop bending to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. And what once felt like loneliness turns into clarity. The fog lifts. You see what was always there, your worth, untouched by rejection, your power, undimmed by the past, your future, unchained from what tried to break you. You are no longer the same person who once feared walking alone. Now you walk with purpose. You walk with direction. You walk with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are becoming everything they once doubted they could be. Let this be the season you choose you, not out of spite, not out of pride, but out of deep, undeniable truth. You can't keep pouring into others while staying empty. You can't keep waiting for someone else to choose you while you abandon yourself. And you can't keep chasing connection if it costs your peace. Walking alone is not a punishment. It is a path back to your soul. It's where you rediscover your voice, your vision, your value. This is your turning point. You've spent enough time shrinking, hiding, compromising. Now is the time to expand, to become, to embody the strength you've always carried. You've already survived so much. You've already made it through storms that others couldn't see. Don't doubt the power of what you're building in the silence. Keep showing up. Keep walking. Keep trusting that every step alone is taking you closer to the life you were born to live. A life rooted in truth. A life guided by purpose. A life that no one can take from you. Because once you walk alone and rise, you become untouchable. When you stop depending on others for your strength, you begin to awaken a fire within that no one can put out. That fire doesn't roar loudly at first. It flickers, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to trust it. But once you begin feeding it with self-respect, with discipline, with truth, it grows. And suddenly, the fear of walking alone fades. What once felt impossible becomes your new normal. You stop asking, who will walk with me? And you start asking, what am I becoming on this path? That question changes everything. It stops the search for rescue and begins the journey of mastery. Mastery over your emotions, mastery over your mind, mastery over your habits. That's the power that's found in solitude. It doesn't come from escaping pain, but from facing it with courage. It comes from no longer running from the mirror, but standing still and staring into it with honesty. It comes from holding yourself to a higher standard, not because someone is watching, but because you finally are. When you choose to evolve instead of escape, you tap into the rare kind of freedom that can't be given, it must be earned. And once it's yours, no one can take it away. Walking alone teaches you what noise used to drown out. It teaches you where you were settling. It teaches you where your boundaries were too weak. It teaches you the cost of ignoring your intuition just to be accepted. And most importantly, it teaches you that survival was never the goal. You weren't made to barely make it. You weren't made to stay silent. You were made to rise, to thrive, to become a living example of what's possible when you stop looking outward for answers and start listening to your own soul. There's something unshakable about a person who's no longer afraid to be alone. Someone who doesn't chase connection, but attracts it by being whole. Someone who doesn't compromise truth for temporary comfort. Someone who walks into the world already full, already enough, already knowing who they are. That kind of presence is rare, and that's exactly what you're building. A presence grounded in purpose. A strength that needs no audience. A life that grows from the inside out. Don't look for shortcuts. Don't wait for signs. Don't ask for guarantees. You don't need any of that. What you need is already inside you. The resilience, the vision, the courage. Stop doubting it. Stop burying it. Let it breathe. Let it lead. Let it shape the life you've always deserved. One step at a time. One decision at a time. One breath at a time. Because every moment you choose to keep walking, alone, aware, awake, you are no longer becoming who they wanted you to be. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. And that, above all, is the real power. When you stop apologizing for evolving, something inside of you begins to shift. You no longer feel the urge to explain your growth to people who chose to remain the same. You no longer try to shrink to fit the roles that once defined you. You understand now, this walk, this path you've chosen, is not for their approval, it's for your freedom. And freedom demands that you stop asking for permission to become who you truly are. You owe no one an explanation for protecting your peace, for raising your standards, or for choosing solitude over noise. This is your life, and it's time you started living it on your terms. There's no shame in choosing distance when closeness costs your self-worth. There's no guilt in walking away from familiar faces when they're the ones holding you back. Real transformation begins when you stop fearing disconnection. When you see that being alone is not a loss, it's a return to the strength you buried, a return to the dreams you delayed, a return to the voice you silenced just to keep the peace. But keeping the peace outside while you're in pieces inside is not peace. That's self-abandonment, and you're done with that. You don't need to be understood by those who lack the courage to grow. You don't need to be liked by those who only support the old version of you. What you need is your own validation, your own respect, your own commitment to walk through the discomfort of becoming even when no one cheers you on, especially then. Because in that silence, something powerful is forming, a quiet strength, a depth that only those who have faced themselves truly know. And that kind of depth cannot be faked. It cannot be copied. It's earned. It's yours. Every step you take alone is teaching you to trust yourself. Every moment of silence is sharpening your clarity. You begin to realize that loneliness isn't what breaks you. It's what wakes you. It shows you who was draining you. It shows you what you were tolerating just to feel accepted. It shows you what you're capable of when you stop trying to be everything for everyone. That realization is a turning point. It breaks the chains of people-pleasing. It silences the need for outside validation. It makes room for truth, for authenticity, for peace that doesn't depend on performance. You are becoming unstoppable because you've decided that your growth is non-negotiable. You are becoming unbreakable because you've walked through the fire of isolation and found power in it. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the steady, unshakable kind that lives within. You're not proving anything to anyone. You're simply becoming aligned with your highest self. And the moment you stop fearing solitude is the moment you start building a life that no one can give you and no one can take away. You're walking alone, yes, but every step is a declaration. I am enough. I am rising. I am free. When you no longer need the world to recognize your worth, that's when you truly start to rise. It's not pride. It's not ego. It's liberation. You stop chasing validation from people who never really saw you. You stop begging for crumbs of approval from hands that were never meant to feed your soul. Instead, you begin feeding yourself with something deeper. Truth. The truth that you are enough, with or without applause. The truth that your path doesn't require permission. And most of all, the truth that your value is not determined by how many people walk beside you, but by how firmly you walk in your own direction. This silence you're learning to embrace, it's not empty. It's full of answers. It's full of strength. It's full of the you that was buried under expectations, distractions, and the weight of needing to belong. And as you sit with that silence, as you stand in that stillness, something sacred begins to happen. You stop rushing. You stop chasing. You begin listening. You begin aligning. You begin understanding that you are not behind. You're not lost. You're exactly where your healing can begin. Right here, with yourself, without noise, without pressure, without pretending. Real power is quiet. It doesn't need to prove. It doesn't need to announce. It simply is. And when you walk alone long enough, you begin to embody that same energy. The world starts to feel different. You notice who drains your spirit and who respects your boundaries. You notice how many things you said yes to just to avoid being alone. And you realize how many times you abandoned yourself for the sake of temporary company. But that's no longer your story. That's no longer your identity. You're no longer a prisoner of the past. You are the author of what comes next. You get to choose who has access to your energy. You get to choose who gets close to your mind and your heart. And if that means fewer people, so be it. If that means longer nights of solitude, let it be. Because this journey isn't about being surrounded. It's about being solid. Solid in your vision. Solid in your peace. Solid in the way you speak to yourself when no one's around. That's what Unshakable is. It's not about looking fearless. It's about choosing not to be ruled by fear. You are becoming the kind of person who doesn't crumble when things get quiet. You are becoming the kind of soul who doesn't fold just because you're not being praised. You walk forward, not because it's easy, but because it's true. Because something inside you knows that this path, this walk, this inner fire, it leads to a life you don't have to fake, force, or beg for. It leads to real peace, real strength, real joy. And no matter who notices or doesn't, you keep walking. Because the one who walks alone and keeps walking becomes unstoppable. Most people never discover who they really are because they're too busy trying to be who everyone else expects them to be. But when you walk alone, the masks fall off. The roles disappear. There's no one to impress, no one to please, no one to pretend for. And in that raw space you come face to face with yourself. It's uncomfortable at first. The silence feels too loud, the doubts creep in. The old fears try to whisper lies. But if you sit with it long enough, if you resist the urge to run back to what once numbed you, something extraordinary starts to awaken. You begin to see the layers you once wore like armor were never protection. They were prison bars. Alone, you start to understand your triggers, your patterns, your pain, not so you can drown in them, but so you can finally heal. You start to recognize how many decisions were made from fear rather than truth, how many dreams were shelved because someone once laughed at them, how many times you stayed quiet when your soul was screaming. This is the reckoning. This is where you stop hiding. This is where you choose to show up not for anyone else, but for you. Because the moment you get honest with yourself, the moment you stop running, you begin to reclaim power you didn't know you lost. That power doesn't shout. It doesn't boast. It doesn't need validation. It simply flows. It guides you to say no when your peace is at risk. It reminds you that your boundaries are not walls. They're doors to your freedom. It gives you the strength to walk away, even when your heart still lingers. And it teaches you that healing isn't loud. Growth isn't always visible. Sometimes the most powerful transformation happens in the stillness, in the silence, in the sacred space of being alone. This is where the real you is born, not the version molded by fear, or shaped by rejection, or muted by doubt, but the version that knows your own worth, even when the world forgets it. The version that doesn't just survive storms but learns to walk through them with grace. The version that chooses alignment over approval. And once you become this version of yourself, you don't go back. You can't, Because you've tasted what it feels like to live free from the noise, the pressure, the masks. You've felt what it means to be whole on your own. Now every step forward is intentional. Every choice is rooted in clarity. Every day alone is no longer lonely. It's empowering. You no longer fear silence. You welcome it. You no longer seek distraction. You seek depth. Because now, you're not just walking alone. You're walking in truth, with strength, with purpose. You're not waiting to be saved, rescued, or completed. You've become your own anchor, your own answer. And in that truth, you are no longer just surviving. You are rising, unshaken, unbothered, unbreakable. The moment you stop needing the crowd is the moment you start hearing your own voice. That voice buried beneath years of noise, comparison, and compromise. It's been silenced every time you second-guessed yourself, every time you chased approval instead of purpose. But now, in this space of solitude, it rises. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It speaks with calm certainty. And the more you listen, the more you begin to remember who you are without the world's expectations wrapped around your identity. You realize how much of your life was lived reacting, not choosing, following, not leading, pleasing, not living. When you walk alone, distractions disappear. You stop outsourcing your self-worth. You stop waiting for others to define what you're capable of. You begin to take ownership of your energy, your choices, your time. And that ownership becomes power. It becomes the fuel that drives your discipline, your standards, your courage. Not because someone's watching, not because someone told you to, but because you've decided that your life is too valuable to be shaped by fear or mediocrity. You no longer seek comfort in the familiar if it costs you your peace. You don't beg to be understood. You don't force yourself to fit in spaces where you have to shrink to be accepted. Walking alone teaches you that silence is not absence, it's alignment. It's where your intuition sharpens. It's where you learn to trust the inner knowing that no one else can give you. That knowing tells you when to let go, when to wait, when to move, and when to stand your ground. And you start to realize that walking alone isn't a punishment, it's preparation. You are being shaped in the dark, refined in the quiet, strengthened in the solitude. The world may not see it, but you feel it. Every doubt you face, every emotion you process, every limit you confront becomes a step toward mastery. Emotional mastery, mental mastery, soul-level resilience. This is the transformation that happens not on stages, but in silence, not in applause, but in alignment. You become the kind of person who no longer breaks under pressure because you've already been broken, and built yourself back better. When you walk alone long enough, you stop chasing outcomes, you focus on becoming. You learn that your value doesn't rise and fall with attention. It doesn't depend on titles or followers or validation. Your value is constant because your soul is. And from this place you stop begging for peace, you embody it. You stop asking for strength, you live it. You become the kind of energy that can walk into chaos and remain still. The kind of presence that doesn't need to explain itself, because its foundation is solid. And that's when you realize, walking alone didn't isolate you, it liberated you. It removed what was never real. It revealed what always was. You, whole, worthy, unstoppable, unbreakable. And no one can take that from you, not anymore. You no longer apologize for your strength. You no longer shrink yourself to make others feel comfortable. You've come too far for that. The silence, the solitude, the internal battles, they shaped a version of you that can't be manipulated by flattery or broken by rejection. You've faced the rawness of yourself without distractions. You've seen your own wounds, and instead of covering them, you learn to heal them. That's why your power runs deep. It isn't loud, it's steady, it's anchored in clarity. You know who you are now, and more importantly, you know who you're not. The more time you spend walking alone, the more you understand the value of alignment over attachment. You're no longer desperate to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. You've accepted that not everyone will understand your path, and that's okay. Their approval is not your oxygen. You no longer entertain spaces that require you to abandon your integrity for acceptance. If it costs your peace, it's too expensive. If it drains your energy, it's not your direction. This is the clarity that comes from separation. This is the wisdom that only silence can teach. You now protect your energy with intention. You guard your mind from the noise of the world because you understand how fragile focus is. You've learned that anything that distracts you from your purpose is a threat. And because you've walked alone, you've built an inner fortress that no one can penetrate unless you allow it. That kind of strength doesn't come from comfort. It comes from confrontation, from facing your fears head on, from sitting with discomfort long enough to find the lesson in it. And once you've seen your own soul survive the storm, nothing external can intimidate you again. This is why you stand differently now. Your back straighter, your gaze sharper, your spirit calmer. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your presence speaks for you. It carries a quiet intensity that comes from knowing exactly what you've overcome. You walk with purpose, not performance, with direction, not distraction, with peace, not approval. This is what makes you unshakable. This is what makes you unstoppable. Because when the world tries to shake you, it can't reach your core. Your foundation is no longer built on sand. It's built on solitude, on struggle, on self-respect. And every step you take alone strengthens that foundation. You begin to realize that solitude wasn't meant to isolate you from the world. It was meant to reconnect you to yourself. It's where you learned how to love yourself without conditions, how to believe in your vision without needing applause, how to move in silence and let results speak volumes. That kind of power can't be faked. It can't be borrowed. It has to be earned in the moments when no one is watching. And now that you've earned it, nothing and no one can take it from you, not ever again. You stopped begging for peace when you realized you were the source of it. You stopped searching for validation when you discovered your worth doesn't require anyone else's permission to exist. What once broke you now builds you. What once left you empty now fuels a fire that refuses to burn out. You are no longer afraid of losing people because you've already faced the most powerful truth. Losing yourself is far more dangerous. And now that you've reclaimed who you are, you're no longer willing to risk that for anything or anyone. There is a sacred power in choosing yourself not once, but daily. When you wake up and commit to protecting your boundaries, when you refuse to shrink to fit into places you've outgrown, when you say no without guilt, yes without fear, and walk away without looking back. That kind of decision doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from alignment. It comes from deep inner work, from seeing yourself as the source of your own healing. That's what separates those who talk about strength from those who live it. You've stepped into that life now, and nothing feels the same. Your silence has become your strategy, your discipline, your language. You've stopped announcing your growth because real growth doesn't need to be advertised. It's seen, it's felt, it's undeniable. The more you stay focused on your path, the less the distractions matter. The noise fades, the opinions blur, the need to explain disappears. That's when you know you've evolved. When peace becomes more important than proving a point. When your energy is no longer available for anything that disrupts your elevation. You used to give your power away by needing to be understood, needing to be liked, needing to be seen. But not anymore. Now you choose to be misunderstood if it protects your peace. Now you choose to be alone if it protects your growth. Now you choose to let go. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know when something is no longer for you. That's what freedom looks like, not in escaping people, but in reclaiming your space within yourself. That space is sacred. That space is home. You understand now that everything you need already lives within you. The clarity, the confidence, the direction. It's all there. It always was. But you had to be stripped of the noise to finally hear it. You had to be empty to understand what you truly needed to be full. That's why solitude didn't break you. It awakened you. And now you walk with a different kind of conviction. Quiet, strong, grounded. You don't need to be saved. You've already saved yourself. And because of that, you're no longer chasing life. You're creating it, on your terms, with intention, with grace, with unstoppable momentum. And anyone who can't meet you at that level will simply watch from a distance as you rise, as you build, as you walk forward, undistracted, unbothered, and absolutely unbreakable. You stopped waiting for permission to live. You stopped hoping someone would come and recognize your value. You no longer place your future in the hands of those who couldn't see your worth in the first place. The moment you realized that your healing was your responsibility, everything shifted. The begging ended. The silence spoke louder than 1,000 explanations. The tears dried up, not because you had no more pain, but because you had finally made the decision to rise above it. That decision changed your life. That moment of clarity became the turning point where you transformed from surviving to leading your own life. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you chose yourself. You don't have to justify your peace. You don't need to defend your healing. People will misunderstand your strength as coldness, your peace as arrogance, your distance as bitterness. Let them. That's not your burden. You're not here to please. You're here to evolve. You're here to grow into the most aligned, focused, and unshakable version of yourself. And anyone who truly understands growth will never ask you to dim your light to make them feel comfortable. The people who belong in your life will never be threatened by your boundaries. They'll respect them. And those who don't were never meant to stay. You've detached from the need to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. That's why your energy feels different. That's why your presence speaks before you say a word. You carry a stillness that cannot be disrupted by surface-level chaos. You're not moved by gossip. You're not shaken by opinions. You're not swayed by attention. You know what you carry. You know what you've overcome. And because of that, your strength intimidates those who still rely on external validation to feel seen. But that's not your concern. You didn't come this far to explain your peace to people still addicted to conflict. There's power in letting go without resentment. There's clarity in walking away without making noise. There's healing in standing alone without feeling lonely. When you stop performing and start being, you begin to attract what is meant for you, not through force, but through alignment. That's why peace feels so foreign at first. You were conditioned to believe chaos was normal, that love had to be earned, that boundaries were selfish. But not anymore. Now you know better. And because of that, you move different. You speak with intention. You live with presence. You love with wisdom. And most importantly, you protect your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. You've become your own source, your own sanctuary, your own reminder that even when everything else fades, your inner strength remains. No more reaching backward. No more explaining to those committed to misunderstanding you. No more abandoning yourself just to be accepted. You're not waiting to be enough. You already are. You're not chasing closure. You've already closed the door. And you're not turning back, because forward is the only direction that still makes sense. You've stopped negotiating with your past. You've stopped bargaining with pain, trying to make it make sense. There's no value in analyzing why someone didn't see your worth. You've outgrown the obsession with closure. Because the only closure that truly matters is the one you give yourself when you refuse to let pain define your future. You've learned that not every wound deserves your attention. Not every trigger requires a reaction. Emotional mastery isn't about suppressing your truth. It's about controlling the power you give to things that no longer align with your growth. You've become intentional with your silence. You no longer react to provoke understanding. You observe. You choose peace, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to walk away from anything that disrupts your inner clarity. You understand now that healing is not about becoming invincible. It's about becoming deeply aware. Aware of who you are. Aware of what you allow. Aware of how quickly peace disappears when you try to please everyone except yourself. You've made the radical decision to no longer betray your soul for temporary approval. That shift changed everything. You are no longer emotionally available to confusion. You've detached from cycles that drain you. You've cut ties with behaviors that gaslight your intuition. The mind games don't work on you anymore because you see through them. The manipulation falls flat because you're no longer hooked on needing to be understood. That is what true strength feels like. When you no longer need validation to feel worthy, you've reclaimed your energy, and now you spend it with precision. You protect your space like it's sacred, because it is. Your energy is not a public playground. It is a fortress. Not everyone gets access. Not everyone gets to stay. Your boundaries are no longer up for discussion. They are not negotiable. They are not walls of fear. They are walls of wisdom. You've learned that not everyone is entitled to your vulnerability. You've stopped handing out pieces of yourself to people who only show up when they're empty. You don't exist to be someone else's emotional crutch. You are not a vessel for toxic cycles. You are a force that will no longer be bent for comfort. If your truth shakes the ground they stand on, let it quake. If your growth makes them uncomfortable, let them retreat. Because you were not born to play small to make others feel secure. This version of you doesn't chase. This version of you doesn't beg. This version of you walks in alignment with clarity, power, and conviction. You have finally understood that healing is not becoming someone else. It's returning to yourself. The self you buried under fear, people-pleasing, and survival. That self is awake now. That self is leading. And there is no going back to who you had to be just to be accepted. You are no longer here to be understood. You are here to be free. And freedom begins when you no longer need permission to be whole. You no longer shrink to fit inside the comfort zones of others. You no longer lower your standards to be accepted in rooms where your presence demands elevation. Your worth is not up for debate. Your value does not require proof. You don't chase spaces that question your existence. You create spaces where your energy is respected, where your voice doesn't need to be raised to be heard. That is power, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that refuses to be diminished. You've stepped into the quiet confidence of knowing who you are without needing to explain it. You are no longer swayed by temporary affection. You no longer confuse intensity with intention. You've outgrown the empty promises, the conditional care, the transactional love that only arrives when you're useful. That was never love. It was control dressed as concern. And now you see it clearly. Now you call it by name. Because clarity is the gift of healing. It doesn't just remove the pain, it removes the illusion. You stop romanticizing your own mistreatment. You stop confusing your capacity to endure with your obligation to stay. You've learned that being loyal to pain is not strength, it's self-abandonment. And you're done abandoning yourself. You are not here to be consumed by people who only take. You are not here to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You are not here to make peace with what poisons your soul. You've tasted freedom, and now anything less tastes bitter. The cycle is broken the moment you choose yourself without apology, the moment you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to walk away, because they won't. The same ones who benefit from your silence will never encourage your voice. The same ones who thrive on your weakness will never applaud your strength. That applause must come from within. That validation must rise from your own bones. You are allowed to evolve without defending your growth. You are allowed to change without offering explanations. You are allowed to close doors gently, firmly, and finally. Not because you're bitter, but because you're awake. Because you've seen what happens when you ignore your inner voice. You've felt the weight of pretending, and you've decided you'd rather be at peace than be liked. That choice is revolutionary. That choice is the foundation of freedom. You don't owe anyone a version of you that is dying inside just so they can feel secure. You are becoming the person you needed when you were breaking. The one who speaks truth without trembling. The one who stands tall without asking for permission. The one who walks away not because they don't care, but because they finally do, about themselves. This is your rise. This is your reclaiming. Every boundary you set, every silence you hold, every time you choose peace over chaos, you are building the life your soul has been begging for. This is not just healing, this is a homecoming. And you are finally home within yourself. You are no longer the version of yourself that begged for breadcrumbs and called it nourishment. That version lived in survival, not in truth. That version molded itself to be digestible, to be less threatening, to be chosen. But you have outgrown the need to be chosen by anyone who requires you to shrink. You no longer audition for roles in people's lives where your soul doesn't belong. You've realized that your energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves access. You've come to understand that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. You've stopped explaining your boundaries to those who only want to cross them. That's growth. That's self-respect forged through fire. The power you now carry is quiet, but undeniable. It doesn't shout or demand, it simply exists. And that's what unnerves people who once thrived on your weakness. They can no longer touch you in the same way. Their words no longer wound, their absence no longer haunts. You have trained your nervous system to stop responding to chaos like it's home. You have taught your mind that discomfort is not proof of love. You have walked through the illusion and emerged with clarity. Now you no longer see loss as punishment. You see it as release. Not everyone was meant to walk the full path with you. Some people were detours. Some were mirrors. Some were lessons carved in pain. But none of them define you. You are no longer interested in being validated by people committed to misunderstanding you. That desire has evaporated. What you seek now is alignment, not approval. Authenticity, not acceptance. Truth, not tolerance. You refuse to fit where you don't belong. You refuse to dim just to make others feel comfortable. That era is over. You've risen from it with scars, but also with sight. You no longer fear being alone, because you've met the version of yourself who no longer abandons you. And that presence is unshakable. That connection is unbreakable. That is the foundation from which everything else will now grow. You are not here to be perfect. You are not here to please. You are here to become whole. And wholeness requires the courage to let go of everything that fractures you. That means releasing the habits that numb your truth. That means ending the conversations that drain your soul. That means walking away even when it hurts, if staying means losing yourself. You now understand that peace is not the absence of struggle. It's the presence of inner alignment. It's the refusal to betray yourself for temporary comfort. It's the strength to choose discomfort if it leads to growth. That's the kind of strength you now carry. And it radiates through every choice you make. You're not healing to return to who you were. You're healing to uncover who you were always meant to be. And that version of you doesn't beg, doesn't settle, doesn't hide. That version walks in alignment, speaks in truth, lives in power. That version is you. Fully, finally, unapologetically. The moment you stop chasing is the moment you start attracting. When your energy stops begging, it begins commanding. You've realized that desperation repels, while grounded self-worth draws in everything meant for you. You're not reaching outward anymore. You're rising inward. You've cut ties with the illusion that your value is proven through what you give away. You've stopped trying to earn love through sacrifice, hoping your silence, your overextension, your endless patience would be enough to finally be seen. But you've woken up, and now, you don't seek to be seen by those who are blind to your worth. You stand in your own light, knowing that true recognition comes not from others but from yourself. You've reached the edge of your old identity and chosen not to turn back. That takes a level of bravery that cannot be taught. It's born in the moment you refuse to abandon yourself again. The moment you say no, not to them, but to the version of you that tolerated pain as proof of loyalty. The moment you walk away with your voice intact, your soul protected, and your standards unwavering. This is not bitterness. This is not pride. This is clarity. This is elevation. You are no longer a prisoner of emotional cycles designed to keep you small. You are no longer interested in suffering just to maintain a connection. You've learned that anything that requires you to sacrifice your peace is far too expensive. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you finally understand yourself. You no longer chase closure because you've closed the door from within. You don't argue for your value anymore. You don't participate in dynamics where your presence must be earned. You don't beg for reciprocity. You observe, you listen, you choose, you respond with wisdom, not impulse. With boundaries, not guilt. With self-love, not self-abandonment. That's the evolution they didn't see coming. That's the transformation no one can reverse. You've gone from reactive to reflective, from drained to discerning. You've stepped out of cycles and into command. You've stopped asking for peace and started becoming it. Every time you choose yourself, you heal. Every time you walk away from chaos, you rise. Every time you honor your intuition over someone else's opinion, you become stronger. You're not the same person anymore. You've changed in ways the past version of you only dreamed of. You've become the one who doesn't settle, doesn't explain, doesn't lower their frequency to be heard. You've become the one who lets silence speak louder than reaction, who lets absence be the answer when presence is not respected. This is power, quiet, unshaken, rooted. You're no longer performing for love. You're no longer auditioning for acceptance. You're no longer shrinking to fit. You're expanding, unapologetically, into the full expression of who you were always meant to be. And from this place, nothing and no one can make you forget your worth again. You've remembered, and that remembering is the foundation of everything you're about to build.